All right, so let's go ahead and get started. We're going to be talking about the last section of chapter 6 today. We were doing some of the notes yesterday and I split them into two chunks. So let's go ahead and dive on in. I'm going to share my screen with you all so that you can see the slides as I'm talking about them. And we're picking up on page 122 of the book. So let's dive on in and bring up the slides here. Alrighty. So, chapter 6, this will be our fifth set of notes, and we left off talking about the 5 pillars of Islam and looking at what those were, about making a pilgrimage to Mecca, about fasting during the month of Ramadan, giving to the poor, making the confession, and praying 5 times a day facing toward Mecca. So you can see in the picture there, the Kaaba that we were talking about, that big black stone box type thing that many people would come to and visit at least once in their lifetime. So Muhammad made the same mistake as many of the people that we've been studying in history this year. He died without clearly appointing his next successor, who was going to lead after he was done. And you would think that people would have been super excited to jump on board and be the next one, but he was so well loved and respected that no one really wanted to be the next one to come after him. So what they ended up doing is choosing 4 leaders from amongst themselves, and they called themselves caliphs, which basically, if you look in your book, basically that just translates to successor. Okay? So the first caliph was Abu Bakr, or Bakr. He was the father of one of Muhammad's wives, and so he kind of became one of the main leaders at that point in time. So they continued to expand under this leadership of the different caliphs. They went on military conquest to not only get more land, but to further their religion. They went into areas of Palestine, Egypt, Iraq, Persia. There were lots of factors that contributed to their very quick expansion. Now, your book talks about this on 123 with the desires for more fertile, productive land. We talked about the other day how the Arabian Peninsula can be a pretty desolate place. And so you need to be able to grow enough food to support your family and your community. There were also weaknesses in the Byzantine and Persian empires in the 7th century. Years of constant warfare and outside attacks left these rivals pretty exhausted and a little more vulnerable to attacks. And then this quest for a jihad, or a holy war, uniting around this common cause of defending and expanding Islam. There was kind of this excitement around that, with the promise that a death in battle would assure them entrance into paradise. All right, so some vocab you've probably heard me talking about here. A caliph, or caliph, is a successor. We're going to talk about the Umayyads as well as caliphates. So Umayyads were a dynasty that started ruling in Damascus, and a caliphate is just basically the government at that point in time. So we're going to look at 2 different caliphates. Okay, the first being the Umayyad Caliphate, okay, and you can see the years up there at the top, 661 to 750. Okay, and the modern day Shiites can trace their lineage back to this group of people. Okay, so there's a couple pictures for you. All right, so the Umayyads created a hereditary dynasty, meaning it passed from grandpa to dad to son on down the line. And so that's how they would basically choose their next leader from the close friends of Muhammad. Okay? They continued to expand their influence into India. They attacked Constantinople, even went into northern Africa. So they were becoming very strong. Okay? They would have pressed all the way into France, and this was in 732. Basically, they were stopped from taking over Western Europe at a pretty important battle known as the Battle of Tours. Okay? So that's about 100 years after the death of Muhammad. Okay? And so their advance into Europe was stopped, but they could basically say that their empire stretched from Spain on one end all the way over to India on the other. So huge, huge empire. Okay? And you can see there on the map where the Battle of Tours was. If you look up there toward the top left, you'll see Paris, and Tours isn't too far from there. And then all of that purple shaded area from Persia and Arabia, Egypt, across Africa, that all was part of the Umayyad Caliphate areas that they controlled. All right, so not everybody was super thrilled with their leadership, and so there was another caliphate that started to arise toward the end of the Umayyads, and that became known as the Abbasid Caliphate. Okay, the modern day Sunnis can trace their lineage back to this group of people here. So a couple more pictures. Okay, kind of cool architecture there. You can see a lot of detail went into designing that. So Abbas, or a descendant of Muhammad's uncle, basically overthrew the Umayyad Caliph and started his own. Right? He appointed many non-Arabs to government positions, which was pretty much unheard of up until this point. So that was something drastically different, and many people weren't fans of that, but if you were non-Arab, you were obviously pretty excited. The peak of the Muslim Empire was reached at this point. They controlled more territory than even the Roman Empire had, and they moved their capital to the city of Baghdad. So you can see another map there of the extent of the Abbasid Empire. If you look there toward the middle, and you can see where Baghdad is and where modern day Iraq is hanging out. All right, so a little bit more. It's always fun kind of seeing pictures of what that part of the world looks like. So their reign didn't last for forever. Right? They started to kind of fight amongst themselves, and their disunity allowed a group of Turks, the Seljuk Turks, to come in and start reuniting much of the Arab world, right? Spreading the empire into Jerusalem. A lot of Christians freaked out, and this is where we get the different crusades that we'll be talking about in the next unit that we do. So the Seljuk Empire ended when the Mongols came in from the east and swept in and basically took over the Muslim world at that point. And so they were a fierce, fierce group of warriors. You've probably seen them in different movies and whatnot. So let's wrap up with our last slide here today with another group of Turks, the Ottoman Turks. Okay, so these were former subjects of the Seljuk Turks, and they basically in 13th, early 14th century started to restore order to the kingdom and restore Turkish rule in this area. The Ottoman Turks basically stretched across North Africa, over into the Middle East and even parts of Southern Europe. So they're creating their own empire. It becomes known as the Ottoman Empire. And at one point, if we fast forward a few years, in 1453, they seize Constantinople. Remember, that was the capital of the Byzantine Empire that we've been talking about. And so they seize the city and it basically caused the collapse of the Byzantine Empire. So that brings this period basically to an end. And next we'll be headed into civilizations in Africa and Asia and talking about some cool stuff there. So your chapter ends with different contributions that the Muslims made in not only medicine, but literature, mathematics, as well as art and architecture. There's some cool pictures in your book with different examples of calligraphy and architecture used in the mosques and whatnot. So anyway, thank you for watching. I'm going to stop sharing the screen here. And I hope you guys have an awesome day. and hang in there with the whole online learning thing. Hopefully this is only a temporary thing. So have a good day, and we'll catch you later for the next video.